A strange heat crept up my neck as Rebecca's voice carried across our table, her words pitched perfectly for nearby diners to hear. "Well, aren't you brave coming here tonight, sweetie? Most girls from broken homes wouldn't have the confidence." The elegant crystal glasses on our table seemed to amplify her voice, and I felt every conversation around us pause. My mother's hand tightened almost imperceptibly on her napkin beside me. I watched Rebecca's smile, the kind that never reached her eyes, as she continued her performance. "I mean, it must be so hard not having a father figure to teach you about appropriate behavior. Yale mentioned you're from a single-parent household." She said it like announcing a contagious disease. My date, Yale, heir apparent to Meridian Bank, nodded approvingly at his mother's assessment. His father, David, cleared his throat and leaned forward, lowering his voice just enough to seem discreet while ensuring we heard every word. "It's really not appropriate for people like you to pursue someone of Yale's caliber. You must understand the complications this would create." The ambient restaurant noise faded to white static as I realized this wasn't a casual family dinner. This was an ambush. "My name is Quinn. I'm 29 and a marketing director. This is the story of how I taught a family of banking elites that some people fight back." 3 weeks earlier, I'd agreed to this blind date reluctantly. My college friend Sarah had insisted Yale was perfect for me. Successful, educated, family-oriented. Sarah had gotten Yale's contact information through her cousin who worked at Meridian Bank and thought we'd be a good match. What she hadn't mentioned was his immediate disappointment when he learned I worked for a tech company instead of a respectable financial institution. "Marketing," he'd said during our first coffee, his tone suggesting I'd admitted to being unemployed. That must be creative. But when he'd suggested meeting our parents, I'd foolishly interpreted it as genuine interest. Mom had been hesitant when I'd asked her to join us. "Something feels off about this guy, Quinn, the way he talks about people, like we're categories instead of individuals." "Maybe he's just nervous," I'd reasoned. "Besides, if it goes badly, at least we'll have backup." If only we'd trusted her instincts. They'd arrived 20 minutes late without apology, David immediately scanning the restaurant like he was evaluating its worthiness. Rebecca had air-kissed me while somehow managing to look over my shoulder the entire time, as if expecting someone more important to appear. "So where's Quinn's father?" Rebecca had asked Mom directly, her voice syrupy with false concern. "Working late?" Mom's response had been gracious despite the obvious setup. "My husband passed away from cancer when Quinn was 12. I've raised her alone since then." That's when Rebecca had raised her voice, ensuring maximum audience impact. "Oh my goodness, Quinn's from a broken home. How difficult that must have been, trying to manage everything yourself." The emphasis on manage carried clear implications about our financial situation. Each comment cut deeper as their performance continued. Yale joined in seamlessly, mentioning how he preferred traditional family values and found strong-willed women exhausting. David added his own commentary about appropriate social circles and understanding one's place. The most infuriating part wasn't their cruelty. It was how rehearsed it felt, like they'd done this before. Finally, Mom's composure cracked. "Did you invite us here specifically to humiliate us? Because if this is how you treat people you consider beneath you, we're done listening." Now, no need to get emotional," David responded, his patronizing tone making my skin crawl. "We're just being practical about compatibility." "Practical?" I found my voice for the first time that evening. "You mean cruel?" Yale laughed, actually laughed. "Come on, Quinn, you can't be this naive. Look around. This is a $200 per person restaurant. Your mom probably works retail. You really think this could work long term?" The assumption about Mom's job was the final straw. She worked as a hospital administrator, managing budgets larger than Yale's trust fund, but they'd never bothered to ask. "Actually," Mom said, her voice dangerously quiet, "I think we should close our accounts with your bank. Immediately." Rebecca and David exchanged amused glances. "Oh, sweetie," Rebecca cooed, "I'm sure your little savings account won't make much difference to us." "You're probably right," Mom agreed, "but my father-in-law's accounts might." For the first time that evening, their smug expressions faltered slightly. "Excuse me?" David's voice had lost its condescending edge. I smiled for the first time all night. You should probably ask Yale about his due diligence skills. He never bothered to research who he was dating. That night, I made a call I hadn't needed to make in years. Grandpa Harrison, it's Quinn. I need your help with something. What's wrong, sweetheart? His voice was immediately alert despite the late hour. It's about Meridian Bank, specifically about the Wilson family. A long pause. What happened? I explained everything, the setup, the systematic humiliation, their assumptions about our background. When I finished, the silence stretched uncomfortably. They have no idea who you are, he said finally, his voice carrying the steel I remembered from childhood visits to his office. None. And they made it very clear what they think about single mothers and people they consider lower class. Come to the house tomorrow morning. Bring your mother and bring your phone. I assume you recorded this? Every word. Smart girl. We'll handle this properly. The next morning, Mom and I drove to Harrison's estate in Westchester, where he'd been planning his response to the Wilson family's behavior. 1 week passed in relative quiet. Yale called constantly, leaving increasingly desperate messages that I ignored before blocking his number entirely. Then Harrison called with news that his board influence as founding shareholder had secured the outcome we'd hoped for. Grandpa Harrison wants us at Meridian Bank tomorrow at 10 a.m., I told Mom. Conference room B. Are you sure about this approach, Quinn? They chose this fight, Mom. They just chose it with the wrong family. The next morning, we met Harrison in the bank's marble lobby before taking the executive elevator to the 20th floor conference room. The Wilson family was already waiting. Looking considerably less confident than they had at dinner, Rebecca jumped up the moment we entered, practically bowing as she rushed toward us. Quinn, Mrs. Chen, I am so incredibly sorry about the other night. We had no idea Q. Sorry about what exactly? I interrupted, taking a seat across from them. Which part are you apologizing for? Rebecca's mouth opened and closed silently, apparently overwhelmed by the catalog of behavior she needed to address. Let me help, I continued. Are you sorry for the public humiliation, for the assumptions about our financial situation, for the comments about broken homes, or just for getting caught? The door opened before she could respond, and Harrison Kent entered with the quiet authority that had built a banking empire from nothing. At 76, he still commanded immediate respect from anyone who understood power. Yale's face went white. I didn't know Quinn was related to your bank's founder? Harrison finished. No, you didn't bother to find out anything real about her, did you? Mr. Kent, David stammered, standing awkwardly. If we had known about your family connection, you would have treated her differently, Mom said quietly. That's exactly the problem. Look, Yale snapped, his composure finally cracking. How were we supposed to know some random marketing girl was connected to the former CEO? She should have mentioned it up front. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Some random marketing girl, Harrison repeated slowly. Interesting choice of words, especially considering you're about to lose your succession path. That's completely unfair, David protested. This is being blown out of proportion. Is it? I pulled out my phone and placed it on the conference table. Let's find out. The recorded conversation filled the room, their voices echoing off polished walls. Rebecca's theatrical gasps about broken homes, David's comments about appropriate social circles, Yale's laughter when he'd assumed Mom worked retail. How dare you record us without permission? Yale shouted when it ended. That's completely underhanded. You mean, like ambushing someone at dinner specifically to humiliate them? I replied. At least I was transparent about my intentions. Harrison stood slowly, his presence filling the space. David, you'll be transitioning out of your CEO role effective immediately. The board has already voted. This is insane, David's voice cracked. Over one dinner conversation? Over a pattern of behavior that reflects your character and judgment, Harrison corrected. And Yale, your path to succession is permanently closed. I won't have someone with your values representing this institution." "You can't do this to us," Rebecca whimpered. "We've given our lives to this bank." "You've taken from this bank," Harrison replied. "There's a difference. Security will escort you out after you clear your offices." As we left the building, I felt the weight of 3 weeks finally lifting from my shoulders. Mom squeezed my hand as we walked to the parking garage. "I'm proud of you," she said quietly. "For what? Getting revenge?" "For standing up for us, for refusing to accept their version of who we are." The aftermath unfolded exactly as Harrison had predicted. David's termination made financial industry headlines, ensuring his reputation would follow him. Anywhere he applied, Yale's behavior during the confrontation had been witnessed by board members, making him unemployable in banking circles. Rebecca, who had built her identity around being the CEO's wife, apparently took a job at a department store. Ironic, considering her assumptions about Mom's career. According to industry gossip, Sarah kept me updated through her network of mutual friends about how the Wilson family was adjusting to their new circumstances. Rebecca's adjustment to retail work was challenging. Yale eventually left town entirely, supposedly taking a job with a small credit union in another state where his family name carried less weight. I felt bad for Sarah, who had innocently set up the original date. "I had no idea they were like that," she apologized. "I only knew Yale through mutual friends." "It's not your fault," I assured her. "You couldn't have known they were professional bullies." Mom had initially worried that our response was too harsh, but I reminded her of something important. "They didn't just insult us, Mom. They insulted every single parent, every person they consider lower class, every family that doesn't fit their narrow definition of acceptable. We didn't ruin their lives. We held them accountable for their choices." 6 months later, I received the promotion I'd been working toward, earned through merit, not family connections. I'm not interested in dating yet, still processing everything that happened, but I'm content with my life. Most importantly, I've learned to trust my instincts about people. When someone shows you who they are through their treatment of others, believe them the first time. And maybe someday I'll meet someone who values character over pedigree, someone who judges people by their actions rather than their backgrounds. Until then, I'm perfectly happy building the life I want on my own terms. Before you go, here's a quick bonus for sticking around. If you love learning and growing like I do, you need to try audiobooks. I've got an exclusive deal with Audible. Your first month is completely free. That's access to over 500,000 titles. Zero cost to you. All the details are waiting in the description. Don't miss this one.